But let me read to you a little bit from this article about Canada's now ever more extreme euthanasia laws allowing what's called assisted suicide, that is, intervention in order to allow somebody to die, or to, in fact, help somebody to die. In 2015, writes Ju, the Supreme Court of Canada reversed 22 years of its own jurisprudence by striking down the country's ban on assisted suicide as unconstitutional, blithely dismissing fears that the ruling would initiate a descent down a slippery slope into homicide against the vulnerable, as founded on anecdotal examples. The next year, Parliament duly enacted legislation allowing euthanasia, but only for those who suffer from a terminal illness whose natural death was, quote, reasonably foreseeable. It took 5 years for the proverbial slippery slope to come into view when the Canadian Parliament enacted Bill C-7, a sweeping euthanasia law which repealed the reasonably foreseeable requirement and the requirement that the condition should be, quote, terminal. Now, as long as someone is suffering from an illness or disability which, quote, cannot be relieved under conditions that you consider acceptable, they can take advantage of what is now known euphemistically as medical assistance in dying, MAID for short, for free. Soon enough, Canadians across the country discovered that though they would otherwise prefer to live, they were too poor to improve their conditions to a degree which was acceptable. Things have only gotten worse. A woman in Ontario was forced into euthanasia because her housing benefits did not allow her to get better housing, which didn't aggravate her crippling allergies. Another disabled woman applied to die because she simply cannot afford to keep on living. Another sought euthanasia because COVID-related debt left her unable to pay for the treatment, which kept her chronic pain bearable. Under the present government, disabled Canadians got $600 in additional financial aid during COVID. University students got 5,000 Canadian dollars. Now, this article goes on, and it's really troubling and dark stuff, but I am going to pause it there and just look at these two questions. The question of the right of a baby to live up from conception on and up to the moment of birth, and the right of the poor in Canada to live as well, right? And what's so interesting is that both of these questions were about rights to begin with. The right of the mother, the so-called right of the mother to terminate a pregnancy, is what sort of motivated Roe v. Wade and pro-abortion activists, and the right of the terminally ill or the chronically suffering to end their own lives in terms of Canada. And yet they have ended up in these, to me, manifestly horrifying dystopian conclusions that obviously deprive people of their rights, obviously dehumanize people and make them less than human in the eyes of the law, put the state in the position of weighing their value, either, how much do they cost the state versus how much can they produce, how pleasurable can their lives be, how comfortable will their lives be. And when the state is in the business of deciding whose life has value, then the story of rights, the story of natural law, the story of the founding of America and the tradition of thinking about these things going back thousands of years in the West, that story has effectively been ended by legal fiat. Because when the state is in the business of deciding, you no longer have a right to life inherently as a human being.